Good morning. My name is Darren Lamont, and this is ASTROVISIONS Transit Watch. Today, we're going to talk about what the hell's going on in America, all right? So I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm not going to waste a lot of time. You guys know I can get long-winded. If you saw one of my previous videos or if you've read me on Facebook, you know that I read the planets from a sidereal perspective, and I tell you what's going on through the eyes of astrology. Okay, so since let me give you the backstory. We're talking about two primary planets right now, Saturn and Pluto. Every time these planets align, the landscape of the globe changes. All right, 1914. We're going to talk about the last 106 years. In 1914, these planets align conjunct. A conjunction in astrology is when two planets align at the same degree of the same sign for a period of time. And when Saturn, which moves through the zodiac every 29 years, one revolution around the zodiac every 29 years, and Pluto, Saturn 29 years, Pluto takes well over 200 years, right? And these two align every 33 to 38 years in a conjunction. And when they do, the landscape changes. Political parties die. Countries that are first world powers take a step down in ranking, all right? Pestilence, disease, sometimes even war. Let's go back in history. 1914, Saturn and Pluto align conjunct. Kicks off World War I. At that time, there was an axis of Germany, Prussia, Germany, Prussia, the Ottoman Empire, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, to name just a few. They're on one side, right? The other side is a trilateral group of France, Russia, and Great Britain. At that time, the United States was a growing power, an emerging power, due to the revolution, the industrial revolution, right, and the battle to come out of the Civil War and all of that. Some 80 years prior to this point I'm talking about, 70 years prior to what I'm talking about. So the United States was they were on a lower ranking here. Okay. World War I kicks off. Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, and the other quote-unquote Axis powers, they are destroyed. In that same period, the war, 1914 to 1918, when the soldiers started coming back from Europe, they brought home this pestilence, this disease called the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu killed 50 million people, and it was born under the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. At the same time, the United States, because of their assistance in the war, they step up now. They're on the stage with first world powers. So now it's the United States, it's Great Britain, to a certain extent, it's still Russia, and it's the United States, and it's France. Okay? I might have said the United States twice. Now, the conjunction happened in 1914. The square happened in around 1924. Okay? During this period, we have emerging leaders. Hitler in Germany. We have Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the United States, who is just now a running for state senator in New York. We have Lenin, who's rising to power in Russia. Was it Lenin? I got to check that. I think it's Lenin. Anyway, the Russian leader was rising to power, as was Winston Churchill. He was rising to power, and so was Mussolini in Italy. 1924, during the square, here come these strong men, and they're going to play a role in the next, in the end of this conjunction. Okay, now we get to the opposition, the Great Depression, right? And Germany is becoming a war power in Europe. Moving forward, we have the next conjunction, 1947. At the end of World War I, the Axis powers, again, Italy and Germany, now they are third world again. You know, they're knocked down off the world stage after rising back to the world stage during the build-up to this next conjunction. All right? World War II ends. In 1947, or let me back up. In 1945, when the war ended, the powers that were left standing were the United States, a capitalist society, and Russia, a communist society, right? And these two engage almost immediately into a Cold War. At that same time, Great Britain was taking a step back off the world stage. It's their turn. They are ceding powers. In 1947, they took a major step back off the world stage when they gave up their crown jewel possession, which was India. They had held India for 300 years up until this point. In 1947, they pulled out of India. They divided it between the Hindu Indians and the Pakistani and Muslims, and created a civil war that still rages today. All right? I'm going to come back to that story shortly. Also in 1947, there was a great migration all over the world, really. In India, there's a migration between the Muslims and the Hindus crossing each other to get to their new lands. There was a great migration from Europe into Palestine in 1948 when Great Britain gave up Palestine and gave it to the German Jews. And that kicked off yet another civil war that still rages today on some level, okay? There was a third migration going on, and it was in its peak at this time. And this was the migration from the former slaves of the South in the United States moving north, okay? So there's three major migrations going on as this new conjunction of Saturn Pluto was forming. But there was something else going on at the time in the world. There was pestilence. There was another outbreak, another epidemic outbreak. Aside from the flu, which is there every single time, and we can go back hundreds of years and we can go back to 1315. 1315, these planets aligned in Sagittarius. And this was the peak of the Black Plague, right? So what happened was, how about this? The Black Plague entered Europe through traders coming out of Asia, and they went into Italy. They entered into Sicily and Italy with livestock, and the fleas that were on the livestock mixed with the rats and roaches in Europe, and the Black Plague was born, right? In 1350, it reached its peak. And 1350 was when the conjunction was exact. The Black Plague killed a quarter of the population of Europe. It was horrible, but it also happened under a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. All right, back to 1947. In New York City, there was an outbreak of polio, there was an outbreak of measles, and there was an outbreak of smallpox. From March 24 of 1947 to April 24, 1947, 7,000 people in New York alone were vaccinated. 7,000. That has precedence, that has connections to what's about to happen here in the United States again, all right? It's about to happen again. Now, back to the political side of things. The United States and the United States and Russia are the world powers. George Patton said at the end of World War at the end of World War II, that the United States should keep going into Moscow so we won't be fighting them 50 years later. Well, he was a prophet with that one because the Cold War lasted a little over 50 years. Now, 1982. Saturn and Pluto align again. Saturn and Pluto align again in 1982. All right. This is the height of the Cold War. The United States and Russia have been fighting each other in proxy wars through every decade. Through every decade since World War II, they have been fighting on some level a proxy war. The Korean War, the communists backed the North Koreans, and the United States was backing the South Koreans. Cambodia and Vietnam, the communists was backing the Viet Cong in the 60s and in the 70s. In the 80s, we have the Iran-Iraq war. The United States was backing Iraq, and Russia was behind Iran on some level. And at the same time, we had the war in Afghanistan with Russia and the United States. While Russia was trying to take over Afghanistan, the United States was backing them. And they were backing them through a man called Osama bin Laden. All right? Now, throughout the 80s was also pivotal here in America because this was the time that the modern conservative movement was born. President Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980 under a Jupiter-Saturn alignment, which also ties into this thing. This is going to get long, guys, so grab a cup of coffee, pause it right here, grab a cup of coffee, and I'm going to keep talking, but this is going to get long. We might go well over an hour, all right? Now, 1980, Ronald Reagan is elected in a landslide over Jimmy Carter. The modern conservative movement is born. Deregulation is born. Taxing the poor and cutting the taxes for the rich is born. And that has raged since. And it spiraled out of control. And Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn are about to rectify that, and we are seeing that right now. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but if you guys have ever had a reading with me, you know how I can preach. All right, so we're gonna get it done today. So, in 1982, Saturn and Pluto aligned. Okay, the Cold War is raging. The United States is building up its Navy. Ronald Reagan, a few years after this, I believe it was in his second term, declared he wanted an 600 ship Navy, and the United States really started building up its war machine. And this was also the time of the birth of Star Wars, the Star Wars initiative, as well as a major increase in nuclear arming and nuclear power. All right. And Russia was trying to keep up. By the time we get to the square, Ronald Reagan has that speech in, I believe it was in West Germany. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Remember that? That was the beginning of the end for Russia. All right. They realized by this time that their economy collapsed because they could not keep up with the spending power of the United States. They could not keep up with them military-wise. They could not keep up at all, right? So a few years later, Russia collapsed. Now there's one world power, and that's the United States. Russia collapsed under the 1982 conjunction. Great Britain took a step down off the world stage during the 1947 conjunction. The Axis powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Prussian or the Ottoman Empire, and there was one other empire besides the Ottoman Empire, and Italy in 1914. Under that conjunction, they all took a step down off the world stage. Okay, there were diseases with each one. The Spanish flu in 1914, polio, another flu. There's a flu epidemic in the 50s in Asia. I can't remember what flu it was, and I believe it was 1957, but it's still under the 33 to 38 year conjunction of Saturn Pluto. Okay, so the flu took off in the 50s. There was a flu in the 40s. There was also an outbreak of polio, smallpox, and measles in 1947 in the United States. Okay, and then in 1982, Russia is a world power. 10 years later, they are dissolved into a number of different countries. All of those countries that they had gobbled up in World War I now gained their freedom, just as countries that were gobbled up in World War II gained their freedom. Okay? Germany is reunified for the first time since the beginning of World War II. Okay? In 1990, or when I believe it was in 90, when Russia pulled out of East Germany and Germany was unified in the early 90s, okay? This was a result. This was a fallout from the conjunction in 1982 is my point. But also in the early 80s, there was an outbreak. And this outbreak started being whispered in 1981 in San Francisco, and that was AIDS. AIDS became an epidemic outbreak and raged for 24 years, all the way into 2006. It wasn't until 2006 that scientists began to get a handle on HIV. Prior to that, to get HIV was a death sentence. And it peaked with Magic Johnson contracting it in the early 90s. All right? So how does all of that connect to now? Remember, at the beginning of each conjunction, there were planets, there were countries who were world powers at the beginning of that transit, and not even halfway through the transit. In most cases, within the first square, which can take 7 to 10 years with Saturn, with the way Saturn moves and the way Pluto moves, it could take 7 to 10 years for them to square from the conjunction. By the time we get to the first square, that the country, one of the countries that was standing as a world power, is on its knees. Okay, so last year, in February of 2019, Saturn moved within 5 or 6 degrees of Pluto. There was a lunation in February of 2019. And a few days after that lunation, which indicated some sort of civil war could kick off, there was a Pakistani national drove an SUV loaded with bombs into a bus of Indian paratroopers, igniting tensions again in the Pakistani-Indian war that has been raging since Great Britain partitioned them in August of 1947. This essentially kicked off the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. At that same time, guys, there was the whispers of the measles, there was salmonella, there was Ebola, there was a dengue fever in Florida. There was a number of different outbreaks starting to be heard across the United States and across the world. There was also the flu. Again, the flu is always a part of this. It is always a part of this. And then, so between last winter and this winter, 75,000 people have died from the flu. And we were just beginning the new Saturn-Pluto conjunction that rages right now. It perfected this year. The United States is the sole superpower right now, with China on their ass. China is gaining steam, but this conjunction just shook up the world, and we are watching this conjunction shake up the United States. What the United States that we knew 2 months ago, a month ago, it's gone. It's gone. We will probably never go back to what it used to be after this. In the run-up to the Democratic nomination for president, there was people talking about socialism, Andrew Yang talking about universal income for the last 20 years or more. Actually, for the last 30 years, we have been talking about socialized health care. That was started with the Clintons, going back to the square of the first conjunction. I'm sorry, not the first conjunction, of the conjunction from 1982. Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary talked about government health care. Well, here we are. And the government will have to provide health care now because the hospitals are going to collapse. Socialism is here. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction is happening in the sidereal sign of Capricorn. Now, if you know anything about Capricorn, it is an energy that is conservative. It is an energy that is it's all about doing things the right way. Doesn't give a damn about how you feel or what you think, right? It is an earth sign. It is a cardinal earth sign. So it's in leadership. Saturn rules government and systems, all right? And with Pluto there, and tomorrow, Mars joins the fray. So we're going to have Mars, Pluto, and Saturn all in Capricorn. And then at the end of the month, Jupiter joins them. So I'm expecting something huge to happen. And by the time you guys watch this video, whatever is going to happen with this conjunction, which could kick off today, March 21st, through the 24th, because there's going to be a lunation on the 23rd, I believe, a new moon on the 23rd. And this new moon with Saturn, Pluto, Mars, and soon to be Jupiter in Capricorn, the world is about to change even more. Now, we could get some bad news out of the White House or out of Washington, D.C., and here's why I say that. Aside from these planets aligning in the early degrees of Capricorn, from a sidereal perspective, the president's Saturn is at 0 degrees Cancer, and his Venus is at 2 degrees Cancer, all right? Pluto is already at 0 degrees Capricorn in an opposition to the president's Saturn. And this is a 6th, 12th house alignment. That's malefic, right? Not only that, Saturn right now, as I speak, is aligned perfectly with the Declaration of Independence chart, Pluto. That's the 1776 chart. Pluto was at sidereal 5 degrees Capricorn. Sidereal 5 degrees Capricorn, right? And Saturn is right there now. And look at how the United States has already been fundamentally changed just this month since Saturn has been there. Fundamentally changed. You know, capitalism has all but come to a screeching halt. And they're talking about giving every man, woman, and child $1,000 or whatever it is, right? And there was a news conference yesterday with the Army talking about how they are going to take over a hotel. Well, a state is going to rent out a hotel. And the Army Corps of Engineers are going to come in and repurpose one of the floors of this hotel to make it an emergency room to give assistance to the hospitals. Because if this doesn't happen, the healthcare system is going to collapse, all right? And if the healthcare system collapses, insurance companies collapses. If insurance companies collapses, banks collapse. If the banks collapse, the economy collapses. They have to do this. They have to do this. At the same time, taxes has come to a screeching halt. That is how the Federal Reserve got its money, through taxes. That has come to a screeching halt, but they still have to kick money into the stock market. What if come Monday, they say no trading until further notice? Capitalism has, at least in a coma, I'm not going to say it's dead, but it'll be in a coma at this time. Now, let me tie this into two other planets, two other cycles that are resetting. We talked about the big one. This is Saturn and Pluto, 33 to 38 year conjunction. All right. Now, I'm not going to be precise on the presidents or the exact years. I'm going to just speak in general terms about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction occurs every 19 and a half years or so. And in the history of the United States, going back to 1840, when these planets aligned in years that started with even numbers, 1840, 1860, 1880, 1900, 1920, 1940, 1960, 1980, 2000 and 2020. There's a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in all of those years. In 1840, they conjuncted, and I believe President Jackson died in office. They aligned in 1860. Well, we all know what happened in 1865. 1865, President Lincoln was assassinated. They aligned in 1880. I believe it was President McKinley or Garfield, one of those guys, was assassinated in the train station in the 1880s. They aligned in 1900. I believe a president died of natural death. I believe it was 1903 or somewhere thereabout. 1920, they aligned again, and another president succumbed in office, I believe after a very short period of time. Maybe, don't give me the line, I can't remember who it was. But look it up. American history, guys. American history. Just look at the history of the presidents in those years. Easily Google facts, which is no excuse for me not knowing it right now. Anyway, 1940, they aligned during President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's third term, unprecedented to this point. They aligned in 1940. In 1944, he died from complications of polio and other things, which is part of the reason why there was that big inoculation for polio in 1947. 1960, they aligned. Actually, it was in 1961 they aligned, and the sky in 1961 had every planet save one in sidereal Capricorn in February of 1961. And we're about to see that again next year, sometime around the inauguration day of next year. That's key. That's key to what's going to happen later this decade, all right? 1960, these planets aligned in 61. And the election was in 60. They aligned in 61. 1963, the entire world witnessed John F. Kennedy get assassinated on national television. They aligned again in 1980 or 81. Yeah, they aligned in 81. President Reagan won in 80. He was nearly assassinated by John Hinckley Jr. when I was in the 6th grade, I believe. All right. 2000, they aligned. And this election was in Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn. 2000, they aligned. And what happened in 2000? Anybody? George Bush and Al Gore. The presidential election hung in the balance. And for months, we had no idea who would be the president. So the shift in power here wasn't an actual death. It wasn't a near assassination. It was what some would call the theft of an election, right? The theft of an election. And we all point to Florida for that, with that the vote count down there in Florida, and then how the Supreme Court says George Bush is president. Unprecedented up until that point, all right? That leads us to the 2000 Saturn-Pluto conjunction. We're going to get a sneak preview of what that's going to be like in the next upcoming month or so. Actually, from March 30th to June 23rd, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto will all be in Capricorn doing their dance. And this is a Saturn-Pluto conjunction the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is a 19-20-year cycle being reset. Jupiter and Pluto is about a 12-year cycle, 12 to 14-year cycle being reset. And the Saturn-Pluto is 33 to 38 years. So we got all these 3 cycles all coming together at one time. Plus, the faster moving planets are resetting cycles at the same time. So this is some major shifts in what's going on politically, economically, and governmentally, because again, when Saturn and Pluto conjunct, governments change. When Jupiter and Saturn conjunct, there's a major shift in power. Sometimes, in 1980, for instance, it was the birth of the modern conservative movement under Ronald Reagan, which literally played a role in the next conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in 1990, 2000, 2001. Okay? So we are about to witness history in the next couple of days. Between today and like the 23rd, 24th, 25th, there could be some major breaking news, all right? Some major breaking news. For those of you who are on Facebook, go back to my profile on March 9 of this month. I told you that between the 16th and the 20th, there could be some major breaking news. Well, it was loaded. It was loaded. And one of the things, I don't think I said this in the post, but I did say this to people in private who can attest to that. I said that we could expect some sort of violence or some sort of natural disaster. Well, the violence happened. It was because of the magnitude of the outbreak. It wasn't a very big story, but there was a mass killing in North Carolina where a man killed 7 people. And I was reading the Mars-Jupiter conjunction with the moon coming across that, igniting it prior to its exact conjunction, which happened on the 20th. The exact conjunction happened a few days ago, right? But a conjunction is a conjunction if the planets are in the same sign. They don't have to be on the same degree, all right? So long as they are in the same sign, and the moon acts as a trigger, a magnet, the ignition, the gunpowder, right? So when the moon comes across a conjunction, expect that conjunction to come alive in some shape, form, or fashion, especially if there are other aspects being shot to the moon or from the moon to other planets besides those that are in the conjunction. So that leads me to another point. When the sun enters sidereal Aries in the middle of April and forms a square to all of these planets in early Capricorn, boom, Mars is going to be there. Saturn is there. Jupiter is there. Pluto is there. These are titans of the zodiac. When planets activate these things, especially with Mars and Pluto, they are the great malefics of the zodiac. And Saturn is the big kahuna in this alignment because Saturn is at home in Capricorn, okay? And Mars does very well in Capricorn and does very well when under Saturn's control. So this could be a time when there have been people talking about martial law. This is a time when Mars splashes down tomorrow in Capricorn, we could expect in the next week to hear something about martial law. We could expect in some way a military deployment, either here in the homeland or somewhere abroad. We could expect probably the National Guard to really be activated, certainly here in the homeland, okay? We may hear something happening with local and state police. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But Mars is indicative of the police, of the military, of emergency workers. Like I said, there was a press conference the other day, yesterday would have been Friday. There was a press conference with the Army talking about how they would take over, how the state, I believe they were in New York. I'm not sure where they were, but I believe they were in New York talking about how the state would rent a hotel from the corporation that owns the hotel, and the Army Corps of Engineers would come in for a limited period of time. They would repurpose a floor, and I believe the general said a second floor of the hotel would be converted into emergency rooms, and the hallway would be nurses' triages. And they were doing this to give relief to hospitals. We might see this happen nationwide, all right? Another thing we may see nationwide is the deployment of the National Guard to protect people from rioting and running on both banks and the grocery stores. So we will probably see lines lined up at the grocery stores to keep things from spiraling out of control, right? We are going to be in martial law, but it's not going to be like it's been projected on television because, again, this is still a capitalist country, and they do not want complete socialism because complete socialism will not work, just as complete capitalism has failed. It has already failed. because you have the haves, who's the 1%, and the have-nots, who's the rest of us, right? They're talking about this, Donald Trump is saying, there's talk out of Washington saying the banks may be required to stop collection of payments. There's already states saying you cannot evict, you cannot put people out of their places. Soon they're going to say you're not going to take people's cars or automobiles. Soon they're going to say you are not cutting off electricity, you're not cutting off water and gas. This country does not want socialism, not complete socialism, but socialism is certainly required. And listen, on a certain level, the United States has been practicing socialism for corporations for the last 30 years. Deregulation, lowering corporate taxes, lowering taxes on the rich. The bailouts of 2008, that was socialism. Let's not look at it as nothing else. It was socialism when they bailed out the banks and bailed out the auto industries. And now they're already talking about bailing out, and the airlines as well in 08. And they're already talking about bailing out the travel industry again because it's taking it in the keister. They're going to talk about bailing out or supporting the hospitals. Socialism is required, but responsible capitalism is also required. And the United States is about to model what that looks like. And it has to save the nation. Otherwise, it's going to collapse. There's no question about it. It's going to collapse. So we are living in a historical time, you guys. We are living in a time that's unprecedented. We've not seen what we are about to witness, and what we have witnessed. And this 2020 has been one hell of a year, right? There was an eclipse at the end of December 26th. And that was about the time that the virus started spiraling out of control, okay? On the day that Saturn left Sidereal Sagittarius and entered into Capricorn, I believe that was January 26th. During that time, that's when borders started closing. That's when, how about this? That's when those senators who are in the news right now, started selling their stock as soon as Saturn got into Capricorn. And then when Mars aligns with Jupiter, the story comes out. You can't make this up. You cannot make this up. All right. So we're living in a historic time. I'll be back later to talk about some of these other transits that are coming. Again, keep your eye on the president. There could be some major news about the president, from the president, or something actually happens to him health-wise. I'm not predicting that he'll have coronavirus, but his 6th house and his 12th house are activated right now, okay? They are activated. And there are lunations that are coming up throughout the later on in the spring that also point to some major things happening to him. Okay, now let me jump forward a little bit. There's going to be an election maybe this year. And the reason why I say maybe is because right around the election day, Mercury stations retrograde. Okay, and around that same time, Saturn and Pluto align conjunct in Capricorn. Don't look now, but this election might not happen. And it may not be for reasons we are thinking right now. I can see that potential. I can see that possibility that either the election doesn't happen or something spirals out of control with regards to the election. Okay, I don't think the presidential candidates who are standing right now, Biden the front runner, Uncle Bernie, and the president. These are the three primary presidential candidates for the next term. You know, I'm under the assumption that if Donald Trump doesn't either resign under pressure, I doubt that's going to happen because this dude has been Teflon. I doubt he resigns under pressure, but it is not out of the realm of possibility with the alignment happening in Capricorn. And he is over 70, and Bernie's over 70, and Joe Biden is over 70, and Saturn rules the elderly, and Saturn in Capricorn and Pluto in Capricorn suggests that the elderly are susceptible. Listen, the Aries ingress chart next month, has Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter and Mars in the 8th house of that chart. That is horrible. That's horrible. So the elderly on some level, and particularly those in government, are possibly susceptible to something. And the primary people in this alignment, because the sun is going to be square that. The sun is going to be square that in the 11th house. And in a mundane chart, the 11th house rules Congress and Parliament. So perhaps we lose a senator or a former senator. The sun is also indicative in mundane astrology of POTUS, or a country leader or a world leader. Okay, so one of these people could fall ill, or even worse. Back to the 8th house. The 8th house is the house of mortality rates. All right, it is a house of death in mundane astrology. It is also the house of the stock market, both on a global level and here in the United States. Right, global stock markets. So Capricorn restricts, Saturn denies, Saturn delays. Square to the sun, and Uranus is going to be with the sun in the Aries square in the middle of April. Stand by. I don't know what's going to happen in the middle of April, but something ugly could potentially play out in the middle of April that throws the election, the potential presidential candidates throw them out of sync. Just throw everything into chaos is what I'm trying to say. My mind, I'm a Gemini rising, y'all. My mind be moving faster than my mouth can. So we can expect some major breaking news in the middle of April. But before we get there, I think this last week to 10 days of March, and particularly the next couple of days, the first portion of next week, could bring us some major breaking news out of Washington. And this news could really be about the president. Something could happen to the president. We don't want that. Nobody wants to see that in the grand scheme. It's a terrible thing when a country loses its leader. It throws everything into chaos. I wasn't alive when Kennedy died, but that was an ugly thing. He was loved. Donald Trump is a polarizing figure. There will be some people that cheer his demise if this were to happen. I'm not going to be in that camp cheering it or being sad about it. I'm usually unmoved by those types of things. Although I will admit the Kobe Bryant thing really hit me right here, right? The Kobe Bryant thing really shook me up. And I'm normally not moved by such things because I have sun and moon in Capricorn. And, the Capricorn energy, we just don't get moved by a lot of things on the external. But that one hit me right here, all right? The Kobe thing. However, what I'm saying here is this. Donald Trump, his chart is under assault by the universe. And I shouldn't use these war terms, but there's pressure. There's pressure on the president's chart, okay? And the primary pressure I'm looking at is his Saturn. He's in a Saturn opposition. And he is also having a Saturn-Pluto opposition. And then Saturn is also going to align with his, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are also aligned with his Venus in his 12th house, in his natal 12th house, okay, from a sidereal perspective. I don't know what's going to happen, but there could be some, maybe he announces some draconian measure to save the nation, or perhaps he announces that he's ailing from some chronic illness, that's a possibility. On another level, next month, something could happen with Biden or Bernie Sanders. Don't know what's going to play out. And whatever happens this summer and then the fall, this is going to be an ugly year, guys. I'm not going to jump into the summer and the fall alignments until later. Let's get through what we're going through now. The storm that we are in, it's a reset and it's a chin check to capitalism that's run off the rails. Capitalism has run off the rails. We all love capitalism. We all love capitalism on some level. It is because of capitalism that you can wake up in the morning and say, I think I want to start a business, and start a damn business. You could not do that in a completely social society. You could not do that because the government would be the business. And we have seen that in its purest sense does not work. But responsible capitalism with a measure of responsible socialism can indeed work. We have seen it work. It is the reason why the stock market has run to the roof. And about the stock market, it is not yet finished falling. It is not yet finished falling. This is only the first wave. There's 5 waves, and I don't even know if this is the first wave. In stocks, there's usually 5 waves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This first 10,000 point drop. I don't even think this is the first wave completed. All right. If you know anything about, we live in a day where many people are reading charts now. You're in Forex, you're in Bitcoin, you're learning to read stock charts. So I'm talking about waves. I'm talking about waves here. We have this stock market wave that has been going up exponentially since 2000 or since 2008. It's almost gone straight up, near 30,000 points. I can remember in my lifetime when it hit 1,000 points for the first time. I was a kid. So over the course of my life, it's gone straight up. I'm 52 years old. It's gone damn near straight up. This fall that we've seen just since the beginning of the year, since the end of February, this 10,000 point drop that has been unprecedented in United States trading, I don't think that's the first wave of the drop yet. I don't think we've seen the worst of it in the stock market. Okay? Now, don't get it twisted. There are people making tons of money during that stock market fall. There are people making tons of money. The only people who are taking it in the keister, the only people who are taking a bath in this are the 401k holders, the small investors who aren't savvy enough or don't have the account liquidity to absorb this and the expertise to get out when you could. So yeah, those people are taking a beating. But the brokerage firms and the professional traders, these guys are making a killing. Okay, so there's a meeting coming up from the White House right now. And we might hear about what I'm talking about with this Saturn going in Mars going into Capricorn. That might talk about, they may talk about the military in some way, perhaps the National Guard in some way, because Mars rules all of that. Mars rules weapons, Mars rules the military, Mars rules police, Mars rules soldiers, Mars rules surgeons, Mars rules emergency rooms, okay? So I don't know what's going to happen, but something is about to go down big in the next couple of days, and it'll be breaking news. Mars, Pluto will be involved. On another level, there could be a report of mass violence because that is a hallmark of a Mars-Pluto conjunction. Violence. All right? We are going to hear probably in the middle of April a lot about a rise in domestic violence, because there are a lot of people who are married out of utility but don't like each other. There are a lot of people in relationships with one another out of utility, but they don't like each other. And now we are told to quarantine ourselves and stay in the house. And in some states, in some places, they will be forced to under armed guard. I don't think that'll be nationwide, but there will be pockets where people will be forced to stay in under armed guard. They are using the scare, the scare of this virus, contracting and spreading this virus is being used as the police, as you will, if you will, to keep us indoors and to keep us from going out and spreading the germs. Plus, there's talk that the only things that are going to be open are the grocery stores and the pharmacies. So you can rest assured that there's going to be a run on those places. And in order to keep a grocery store from being sacked, like 1992 in Los Angeles after the Rodney King riots, where grocery stores around Los Angeles and connecting cities and counties were sacked because of the riots. You know, I'm sure this is going to be avoided on some level with a responsible use of the National Guard and the police, as opposed to reacting after the fact when people have made a run on these places. All right, that would be the worst thing that could happen. That there's a run on the grocery stores to the point where people are in there fighting and just walking out with stuff that would sack a city for a while. And I lived through that Rodney King thing. I was in California. I was in the military at the time, stationed in Long Beach, and I can recall the smell of the smoke from the fires and the sirens all over the place, and seeing police ride around in riot gear, 4 deep, you know, in a car. Each one of them have shotguns in their lap, just ready. It's a scary sight. It's a scary thing. Nobody really wants to experience that. I certainly don't want to experience that again. Nor am I afraid of that. But it would be a bad thing if that played out. So I think what's going to happen, according to the charts, is that there's going to be some protections for grocery stores across the United States on some level, with a combination of the military, the National Guard, and possibly state police, and perhaps even on a certain level, local police. However, I don't expect local police to do a whole lot, because right here in St. Louis, they've already said that they are not, in St. Louis City, they're only coming out if a crime is in progress, and there's a chance that they could catch and apprehend the suspect. Otherwise, they'll just take a report, right? They'll just take a report. So they are not really active these days. But not a whole lot of people aren't right now. At night, though, here I can hear sirens, sound like fire trucks and ambulances, and that's a common thing right now because the elderly are the most susceptible. The elderly are the most susceptible, and we already have socialized medicine for them in the form of Medicare and Medicaid, right? So, of course, you want to really be able to respond when they need help. So, I don't know what's going to happen, guys. I don't know what's going to happen exactly. I can just say we can expect the military and through the National Guard and perhaps Army medics, perhaps Navy medics on coastal cities with hospital ships move in and help cities that are struggling to help, particularly up in Washington. You might see a hospital ship deployed there. There may be a hospital ship deployed off the coast of California. There may be a hospital ship in the Gulf somewhere or on the Atlantic seaboard, as well as U.S. medics from the Army and the Marines moving in sometime this spring to help hospitals, okay? And this is going to lay the groundwork. If you've gotten a reading from me, I told you on a personal level what you need to be looking for between March 30th and April 24, right? I'm sorry, March 30th and June 24. Told you what you need to be looking for on a personal level. Things that you can do to make your life better. Looking for opportunities to plant seeds. Now, I'm not going to talk about what this means for people personally, but I will say this. Things that happen between March 30th and June 24th specifically, but also from March 30th to May 12th, before Jupiter goes into a retrograde status, that period, what we see play out in this period, will be a foreshadowing of what the United States will become in 2021 and beyond. All right? Because again, remember, we are in the Pluto return for the Declaration of Independence birth chart. All right? We are in the Pluto return for that, right? And when Pluto returns, governments change. All right? This country is about to be fundamentally changed, and we are watching the beginning of it right now. There's a very strong possibility that this time next year, we will be either in the middle of or coming out of a constitutional crisis. What am I saying here? Let's just say that there is no election in November. For whatever reason, there is no election. And we get to Inauguration Day. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Donald Trump just declares himself president. But that can't happen. Because right now, Nancy Pelosi is poised to be the most powerful person in the country and in the world. If there is no election, Donald Trump's term ends at 11:59 Eastern Time on Inauguration Day in 2021. I don't give a damn what he thinks. As per the Constitution, his term ends at 11:59 on Inauguration Day. At 1200 or high noon, guess what? The Speaker of the House is in charge of the country until further notice. So there will have to be a special election to elect a new president, and I would not be surprised if Liz Warren is the one who is going to be nominated from the other side. Now, out of this, 10 years later, one of these two parties will not be standing. I don't know which one it is, but one of the two parties will not be standing in 10 years. Or, if it is standing, it will be fundamentally changed. We are in an unprecedented time, and history is being written in ways that we have never, ever seen. And in 100 years, this will be a major point in history. This year and next year will be major points in history. All right. The United States is about to be changed fundamentally, and just get ready for it, guys. Get ready for it. This is an opportunity with all of us being at home now. This is an opportunity for people to restructure their lives. Here's why I say that. Capitalism is about to change. Automation is about to take over a number of jobs. When things go back to whatever normal is going to be, there are a lot of people who are not going to have jobs anymore because robots are going to take over. Automation is going to take over. AI is going to take over. So we are going to, if they don't figure out how to provide universal basic income for everybody, people are just going to die from starvation. All right. So that's probably going to happen. UBI on some level is probably going to happen, and it'll be subsidized by corporations through automation, right? Because they're about to get a chin check. They've gone unfettered for the last 30 years with lowering of taxes on the corporate side and lowering of taxes for the individuals who earn over X amount, right? So we can stand by, just stand by. There's going to be some major changes. And if you don't figure out how to earn your own money, it's going to be tough to live. And right now, you get a chance. You're going to have an opportunity to figure it out. You know, you're going to have the, my life hasn't changed very much because I've worked from home for a number of years. You know, so this quarantine has not affected my life at all. Okay. But those who don't know how to earn their own money, you better figure it out, because some of you will not have a job when this is over with. All right. Some of you will be out of work and your industry will be fundamentally changed. So right now, the only people who are working are certain people in retail, like grocers, and I think gas stations have made a move to stay alive by moving away from gas so much and moving into providing food and drinks and being a quote unquote retailer, like people like Subway and not Subway, companies like Quick Trip and Wawa on the East Coast and Mobile on the Run and people like that, Speedway and even the truck stops to a certain extent have all gotten into grocery retailing. Those companies are going to be all right. Grocery stores and pharmacies, Walgreens, CVS, and people like that, they're going to be all right, but they are going to be overworked, right? So, we've been programmed in this country to worship the police as heroes. You're about to see who the heroes are because the police ain't even responding right now. They ain't even responding. The heroes are the people who make sure we are eating, and they are making sure that we have our medicines, those of us who need it. All right? The rest of us who are healthy, just hunker down, ride it out, keep your vibrations high, because fear is what lowers your immune system. Fear is no good. And fear, I like to use an acronym for fear: false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. All right? Fear only exists as a condition in the mind. And when you face your fear, it scatters like a dog in 8 different directions. Oh, as a child, I can remember running from a dog. And the dog wagging his tail, tongue out, he chasing me because it's his instinct to chase something that runs. But he just wanted to play. In my fear, I thought he wanted to bite me. So I jump on a car and he's barking, his tail is wagging, he wants to play. And man, get off my damn car. Anyway, later on in life, I can remember a stray dog coming at me, but I was older this time. I think I was a teenager. I was older this time. I turned and faced that dog and walked toward the dog and said, "You better not." But I was afraid, but I turned and faced him. I was like, "You better not." And I raised my book bag and the dog stopped and took off. That was eye-opening to me. Oh, wow. You face your fear and it will flee. Face your fears and they will flee. I promise you. All right. So again, by the time I end this video, there might already be some breaking news going on, but certainly between today, which is Saturday, March 21st, and 23rd, 24th, 25th, sometime this early part of this next week, week starting tomorrow, first day of the week, Sunday, the day of the sun, we can expect some breaking news. All right. Those of you who know me know I have predicted earthquakes to the day. I have predicted hurricanes to the day. I have predicted school shootings. I have predicted things in people's lives. So I know what I'm talking about here. All right. There's very likely something going to play out in a breaking news story. And I know we've gotten to a sensational media where everything's a breaking news story, but these are going to, when signs like Mars change signs, when planets like Mars change signs and align with outer planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, things happen. So it'll probably take place early next week, Monday or Tuesday, but it could happen as early as today or tomorrow. I don't know what's going to play out. Stand by. I'll talk to you guys next week with another video from ASTROVISIONS. Peace.